Anti-Israel protests on college campuses continue to escalate as violence and chaos erupted overnight at institutions including Yale, MIT, New York University, the University of Michigan, and UC Berkeley. While school administrators seek to de-escalate tensions, many are asking if these chaotic scenes are a symptom of the environment they've created. And given the billions in tax dollars that flow to these institutions, how is Congress responding, or are they? Joining me to help us answer these questions is Congressman Ron Estes. He, among other things, serves on the House Committee on Education and Workforce. He represents the 4th Congressional District of Kansas. Congressman Estes, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Joseph. It's good to be on.
Well, tell us your reaction to the escalating tensions and anti-Semitic rhetoric that we're hearing on college campuses throughout the country.
Yeah, it really is appalling to see what's happened. You know, almost immediately after October 7th, you saw a lot of protests starting against Israelis and Israel, and that almost immediately turned into attacks on Jewish and turned into anti-Semitic comments and death threats and harassments. And we've seen it most commonly displayed on university campuses that are supposed to be environments where people learn. And instead, this just intolerance has been created there and created a culture of harassment and intimidation. And the university professors aren't doing anything about it. I mean, and the administrators, they actually, in some cases, either seem to support or actually give very tepid responses if they do give a response at all. And it's not addressing the problem. I mean, we see so much anti-Semitic activity around there, and we need to focus on making sure that human beings are treated properly and not being addressed and attacked and criticized and having death threats just because of their religion.
Congressman, why do you think college campuses have become the epicenter for these? First, they were just kind of pro-Palestinian, then they became anti-Israeli, and now they are increasingly just anti-Semitic events.
You know, I think it's driven off of there's just so much, quote unquote, free money coming from government funding of these universities. And whether they're a private institution or whether they're a public institution, you see a lot of federal dollars in the case of state institutions. You also see state money, like you see in Berkeley and others. But so much money that flows through that provides this cushy lifestyle. And so you see the administrators and the professors that really have no wherewithal to deliver anything of value because they're not focusing on how to provide a good education. Instead, they're focusing on their political beliefs and their political posturing. And what they've done is they've taken young men and women who are trying to learn what's going on in the world and what they should focus on, and are distorting their views of the world. And it's one of these things we're seeing it over and over again with just the cost of education so expensive. You see that today. And we need to make sure that we're providing a good quality education and that administrators and professors are held responsible to actually provide that administration at a reasonable cost.
Yeah, there are so many dynamics at play here. You mentioned the rising, now incredible cost of higher education in many cases. We're talking at the elite university, something like $90,000 a year as a starting sticker price. Yet we see these campuses becoming increasingly radicalized. And you also mentioned the fact that a lot of government money, even to private institutions, ends up at these institutions. Is there a role for Congress to play in dealing with the activity that we're seeing on these campuses?
There really is. You know, as a member of the Education and Workforce Committee, I mean, we have the responsibility to provide oversight on funding that comes from the federal government. And for the most part, the federal government plays a more active role in actually providing dollars for not just K through 12 education that the state and local governments choose, but also higher education. And so much of the money that comes out of the federal government goes to those higher education universities. And obviously, college costs are expensive. And I'm a supporter of a piece of legislation that we have moving through the House right now, College Cost Reduction Act, because we've seen, actually, you can almost see a parallel path of, as government funding has increased since the 70s, you've seen this rapidly rising cost of higher education. And now we're suffering the consequences of that.
Well, and that really is a function of Economics 101. Higher education costs go up as that's subsidized. To my understanding, the only other industry, sector of the economy in which that's happening is healthcare, where costs are also essentially guaranteed by the government. And so it should be no one's surprise that there's not really any reason, there's no incentive to reduce costs when the government's essentially guaranteeing payment. So we do see costs rise. From your seat on the Education Committee there in the House, any reason to think that reform is on the way? Is there an effort to look at higher education in a way that's different so that perhaps fewer children will be radicalized, but also it will become just less expensive and more accessible?
I think it's going to take a major effort on the part of the American people to stand up and voice the concerns that we're seeing over and over again in more recent years. And it's going to take a long period of time. I mean, this didn't happen overnight. America, typically allows things to fester and get to a very critical state before we actually start to react back. And this has grown since the 1960s and 70s. And so we've got to focus on, let's make sure that we have higher education universities that focus on providing good education. We want to have the educated workforce that actually move force and help with our economy, but we need to make sure that it provides good services and work. So it's going to take a long period of time, and there's a lot of inadequate thought process that's going into leadership of these universities right now, and it's going to take time for them to realize that the mistakes they've been making and that we need to correct that moving forward.
Yeah. Do you see any evidence that the market is adjusting? And by that, I mean, are families and prospective students starting to make different choices as a function of the ideology that they see on these campuses and also just the costs that are making it inaccessible to most Americans?
Yeah, I think you're seeing that more and more. And just this year, the Department of Education, which has gotten large and bloated for being a very part-time function, but the Federal Department of Education couldn't even get the financial aid system, FAFSA, working in time to provide students. So you got a lot of parents that are anxious and worried about their students. You see case after case where people are making different choices. You see the enrollment, the applications have dropped at some of these Ivy League schools in particular, but you see it at a lot of universities as well. And you're seeing people making the conscious choice that maybe that's not the right decision for me. Maybe that's not the right career path I want. Maybe that's not where I'm interested in. And in the meantime, people are going out and finding good paying jobs as plumbers and mechanics and electronic technicians. And they don't necessarily have to go spend as much money on a 4-year degree when they can actually have a career that actually provides them a good living wage and that be able to grow and provide their family for that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. As the father of now and soon several college-age students, the ROI just isn't there for so many degree programs, and families, I think, are going to be forced to kind of reconsider what their options are, and that will make a market adjustment. But, Congressman, I want to switch topics slightly. Despite getting swatted down by the Supreme Court already, the Biden administration announced another round of student loan bailouts. Now, you serve, again, on the House Education Committee. Should Congress be involved in a student loan bailout program?
It really should. And President Biden is trying to do a runaround. In fact, what he's literally doing is violating what the Supreme Court has ruled. It's an election year, so President Biden's pandering to get more votes, just like he did 2 years ago, and tried to propose this. He's calling it a bailout, but in reality, he's transferring debt that individuals chose to take on themselves, and he's trying to claim that we should give that to other taxpayers and make them pay back for that debt. Whether they had student loans at all, or whether they paid their own student loans off, or whether they borrowed money to start their own business, expected to pay back the student loan from this offer that President Biden is trying to make. And again, it's an election year gimmick. The Supreme Court said he couldn't do that under the laws of the land. And so instead of following what the Supreme Court ordered him to do, he shuffled a few paragraphs around and tried to do it again. And this is going to get turned down again, just like it has before. He doesn't have the authority to waive all these debts and to transfer that cost on to other taxpayers. And that's the purview of Congress and the legislative branch to write up laws that need to be followed by the executive branch.
Well, you mentioned there the political motivation for President Biden in doing so in an election year. And of course, student loan debt forgiveness stands to benefit more significantly younger voters. Increasingly, there are older voters who continue to hold on to student debt, but it's primarily younger voters. And data that I've seen recently that I think was relevant is this younger voter demographic is also the demographic that has indicated they are less likely to vote for President Biden because of the U.S. government's official support for Israel in this conflict. So is this a situation where he's responding to the trouble that the Middle East and the Israel conflict is causing his political campaign with younger voters by saying, hey, but here's some money?
Yeah, you're really seeing these things seem to be coming together. I mean, President Biden's been very weak on the opposition and calling out the anti-Semitism that we've seen on college campuses. And so he's trying to shore up his support by offering, pandering to folks that are normal supporters of his. And literally when we get back and look at it, it's less than 13% of the American people that have student loans. And so what he's trying to do is cater to their vote and offset some of the issues that aren't being addressed and resolved by the college administrators when they should be leading in terms of making sure that the laws are followed on their campuses.
Now, Congressman Estes, in about 30 seconds, what's your advice for parents of students and students on campus who are just kind of trying to deal with what their college campus might be going through right now?
Yeah, I think parents need to be very introspective, and their children need to be very introspective on where they want to go, what they want for a career, and not necessarily jump into what sounds like a nice university to go to, but be thoughtful in terms of how they do that, and also be cautious. Lots of universities are not doing the right things. There are others that are doing the right things and need to focus on that. So you need to keep that in mind and making sure that you have a safe environment to have that good learning experience that you want.
Congressman Ron Estes, thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you.